Former cult members, at what moment did you realize you were in a cult? Story 1. I used to practice Kung Fu at what was basically the most Mac Dojo place ever. On top of all the usual money grabbing BS, the Grandmaster changed his title to something like His Celestial Holiness and started getting his students to travel to the woods to build his temple. Nope. Opinion. How does someone make that leap? One day you're just a sensei, and in the next, you wake up feeling like His Celestial Holiness. That's crazy. Story 2. When I was told I couldn't ask questions, I was 14. All that did was make me ask more questions. I ended up at the public library reading about codes. This was in the 90s. Opinion. I think they would have an easier time keeping people if they didn't shy away from questions. After all, nobody likes to feel fooled, and having doubts is a sign of normal critical thinking. I believe telling people to stop thinking for themselves is a sure way to push them away. But then, maybe that's the difference between cults and churches. Story 3. Was accidentally in a religious cult. I would see how the pastor would treat non-members and members who didn't comply with what he wanted, and I would think, I hope he doesn't start acting like this towards me. He would berate people, gossip, expect us to stay at his house until late hours, forbid us to hang out with non-members, and he even asked me to move in there when I already had my own place to stay at. I noticed it was a cult when I told them I was hanging out with an old friend, and they proceeded to ask why I was doing that, and that they were my friends. I came to a service that following Sunday, and the pastor saw me and said, I had a message I was going to preach, but I'm going to preach a different message today. The whole service was pretty much him talking bad things about me and making rude jokes. I knew this sermon was about me when he kept referencing the person hanging out with other people and saying it was sinful and of the world. I never felt so embarrassed in my life with everyone laughing at me. I sat that entire service just embarrassed. Once I left, several of the members attempted to contact me, with a few of them trying to go to the movies with me at midnight when they know very well the closest movie theater was an hour away. And what movie theater shows movies at midnight? After I stopped going to that church, a few of the members completely stopped talking to me, despite us being friends. Still can't believe that happened to me. Opinion. That go to the movies thing feels really creepy. It seemed like they were trying to isolate you for some reason. That's a red flag if I ever saw one. I think it's good that you followed your instincts on that one. Story 4. I was young at the time and I didn't realize until after my family had left. Looking back on it, the way the community practically worshipped the leader, hanging on his every word, whether it was what they should name their baby or what movies were evil and would bring the devil into their lives, really should have tipped me off. The biggest red flag I can't believe I didn't realize at the time was when he decided one of the kids in the community was possessed and needed an exorcism. That kid was me. I won't bore you with the details, but remembering that years later is what made me finally realize, oh no, I was in a cult. Opinion. It makes me think that whenever there is a leader involved, it could be a sign of a cult. Also, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't bore anyone by talking about your exorcism. Story 5. Had an accident when I was 12 that injured my back. Sitting hurt. I convinced my mother to allow me to walk around during the multi-hour-long services in the library/overflow room downstairs that had a speaker blaring whatever was going on at the pulpit. In that library were all the original cult publications from 80 plus years previous. No one ever paid any attention to them, but I was a voracious reader. They were into some wackadoo stuff at the beginning that totally contradicted the current teachings. For example, pyramid power, numerology. I never said anything because it was a closed society and questioning meant total shunning, but from that point on, I was aware that it was all garbage, and I spent most of my time planning my escape. When I finally public called BS 6 years later, I lost everyone and everything. Life was bad for a while, but 10 out of 10 would do it again. Don't answer the door when Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking, especially if you have children. They're hiding tens of thousands of child touchers in their ranks. Effing weirdo doomsday bastards. Opinion. Questioning meant total shunning. Say no more. Story 6. Mine wasn't a typical definition of a cult, but I realized Jehovah's Witnesses were pretty delusional by about 12, 13 years old. Took me a few more years to get out due to my father being an elder, and someone who had no problem physically forcing his son to go to the meetings. And out in service, door knocking. Sounds like a corny fake scenario, but it took me being tough enough to fight him off. Was asked to leave the house at 17 while still in grade 12, so I did. I had a job and had an older friend to live with. That's when I realized it was, in my opinion, a cult. That you would turn on your son because he didn't believe in your beliefs. That you would beat your son because he was being mistreated at school and couldn't stand door knocking anymore. In his own neighborhood where he encountered classmates, either at their homes or as they were riding their bikes down the street on a sunny Saturday morning, with me walking with my dad in a suit and tie, with a briefcase full of maniac ravings about living forever. Opinion. If your beliefs take precedence over your love for your child, then it's not your child you love, it's your beliefs. Story 7. Remember not to browse apostate websites in case they weaken your faith. Shouldn't truth stand up under scrutiny? Opinion. You would think that would be the case. Confirmation bias can be a powerful thing though. Story 8. When they said I am going to marry someone from Korea. When I said no, they said they already bought the plane tickets. Opinion. I mean, Koreans are pretty cute. Maybe they just were the best wingman you could have asked for. Story 9. 3 things happened. 1. A person lost their life from suspicious circumstances, loosely tied to the group, and none of the adults would listen to me that he did not commit self-deletion. 2. I started to meet these back parking lot kids at school who were into free thinking and questioning religion. Most are artists and successful loving parents now. 3. Couple those things with the fact that the youth group weekly Bible study leader thought she could actually see demons, and the head youth leader was backing her up on her claims, and I was pretty ready to leave when I turned 18. I did not go back. Edit. I forgot. My mother tried to exorcise demons from me when I was 18 because I came home late at 11:30 p.m. I was an A and B student, had maybe smoked the green stuff like twice, was a virgin, and all in all, a pretty good kid. I had no language or education at that point to argue that I was in fact not possessed by the devil, because you can't argue with crazy. She kicked me out a few weeks later, and I stayed with a family of Wiccans before I moved to my first shared apartment. Opinion. That's a lot. Losing someone under suspicious circumstances and having adults dismiss your concerns must have been tough. Well, at least meeting free-thinking friends at school must have been a breath of fresh air. Story 10. A couple of things. When I found out about the Australia Royal Commission into institutional responses to child-related bad stuff, specifically case studies 29 and 54, watching a governing body member, one of 8 leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses, Geoffrey Jackson Lai, reword questions, avoid direct answers, and get thoroughly beaten by a lawyer on biblical interpretation, I was like, oh wow. I started my escape and doctrinal research. The oh no and bawling, lots of bawling as a mid 30s man, came after watching episodes 5 and 6 of season 1 of Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath. In the first 4 episodes, I saw similarities. In episodes 5 and 6, I saw things that I had happened in my life. Get ad hominem attacks from my mother, sister, and brother-in-law, which from watching the show I expected would come, gave further proof that Jehovah's Witnesses being a doomsday cult. Research whatever it is that you're in, especially if born into a religious belief system. Opinion. And I think people should do even more research if they discourage you from doing so. If it's the truth, it will stand up to scrutiny. Story 11. When I learned our founding prophet would send men on missions so he could sleep with their wives and daughters. Or maybe when I learned our cult had over 40 billions in the stock market and over 100 billion in assets, but only used 0.5% of the donations it receives to help the poor. Or maybe when our 94-year-old prophet's latest revelation was to take vitamins. Opinion. The idea of sending these men on missions to other countries while someone is looking after their wives and children really makes me sick. Story 12. One of the leaders said that we shouldn't watch any TV or read any material that wasn't published by the church. I said, well, I just like the Road and Track magazine. I don't think it's anti-religious. He replied, that material will cause you to lust after material things and you shouldn't read that. It was at that point I knew I had to get the F out of there. Opinion, that's a clear case of control. He was manipulating religious to exert power over you, using it as a tool to dictate your choices and actions. Story 13. When I was told that proceeding in a ceremony and receiving a gift that was a religious rite of passage to adulthood would require me to take upon myself certain sacred obligations, and that I could not know them beforehand. I could either leave then in front of my family or essentially sign a blank check to swear any oath required of me later on. Opinion. Being required to sign a contract without knowing what's in it, and on top of that having to do so under such duress, man, that's really messed up. Story 14. When I found out I had been lied to about foundational aspects of the church, and that the founder married a 14-year-old and secretly married tons of women without telling his first wife. Opinion. Secretly married, alright. That pretty much means he found another authority figure, probably a religious one, to help him manipulate some unsuspecting girl into thinking she was entering a sacred union, all while keeping it a secret. That's truly disgusting. Story 15. When I was 12 and stopped going to church because I didn't want to, and they sent other 12-year-olds to my house every Wednesday for activity night to try and get me to come back to the church. It continued through high school until I finally called an elder and told her to stop harassing me because I didn't want to go to church and didn't believe in a God. That stopped them real quick. Also, this was a Mormon church. Opinion. It's great that your parents allowed you to stop going there. Honestly, I don't think it's a cult. From what I've read about cults, a key trait is that they constantly pressure you to return and never stop bothering you. Story 16. When they kept taking more and more of my time, it got to the point where I realized my church viewed everything outside of church as evil, or as a complete waste of time. I knew this wasn't true and a miserable way to live. Once I realized how miserable I was, the rose-colored glasses came off, and it all fell apart almost immediately. Mormon, by the way. Opinion. Labeling everything outside the church as evil and a waste of time sounds extreme. I've met people from that church before and they never said anything like that to me. Story 17. When I wasn't good enough. It wasn't enough that I showed up, paid money, and contributed to the group. There was always this hint of disappointment that I couldn't bring in more people. Through subtle hints like, you can bring other people if you'd like. We would love to be able to save your loved ones. To why don't you ever bring people in? Your loved ones deserve to be saved. People who were sociable and outgoing were described as the most desirable people to invite into the church. My pastor straight out said, "We aren't going for them loners you see sitting alone at lunch. We need to go for the social kids with groups of friends all around them. It's our goal to save as many people as possible, so we need to go for them." Opinion. I don't think it's about religion itself. It's about corrupt individuals using religion as a tool to exert control to take advantage of others. People exploit every belief system out there, and some even create their own religions for the same purpose. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.